Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I start by joining what you said on Monday in paying tribute to my friend and yours, Paul Flynn? He served in this House for over 30 years as member for Newport West. He was courageous, he was warm, he was witty. And as the Prime Minister pointed out, when he served briefly on the Shadow front bench, he came to the first Shadow Cabinet meeting and welcomed to me my diversity project to promote octogenarians to the Shadow Cabinet. His book on how to become an MP is absolutely a must-read. He was respected all across this House, and I think we're all going to miss his contributions and his wit and his wisdom. Our deepest condolences to his wife Sam and all of his family and all of his much wider family all across Newport and all across Wales. He was a truly wonderful man and a great and dear friend. I also hope, Mr. Speaker, that the House will join me in paying tribute to Baroness Falkender, who died earlier this month, and sending our condolences to her friends and family. When Marcia served with distinction as Political Secretary to Harold Wilson, she was subjected to a long campaign of misogynistic smear and innuendo, and I think she suffered a great deal as a result of it. And we should remember the great work she did as Political Secretary to Harold Wilson. The Prime Minister responded just now to a question on anti-Semitism. I'd simply say this. Anti-Semitism has no place whatsoever in any of our political parties, in our life, in our society.
Mr. Ellis, be quiet now and for the rest of the session. You used to practice as a barrister. You didn't make those sorts of harumphing noises in the courts, or if you did, no wonder you no longer practice there. Jeremy Corbyn.
As I was saying, Mr. Speaker, it has no place whatsoever in our society or in any of our political parties, and my own political party takes the strongest action to deal with anti-Semitism wherever it rears its head. Mr. Speaker, last week an EU official said the UK government was only pretending to negotiate, adding there was nothing on the table from the British side. So with just 37 days to go, can the Prime Minister be clear what will she actually be proposing today when she travels to Brussels?
Yeah.
Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, of course, there are a number of meetings taking place in Brussels. My right honourable friend, the Brexit Secretary and the Attorney-General were in Brussels earlier this week and had a constructive and positive meeting with officials in the European Commission on the issue of alternative arrangements and work on alternative arrangements. The issue that I'm taking to Brussels is the one I've been speaking to EU leaders about over the last few days, and that is the concern that was expressed in this House of ensuring that we could not find ourselves in the current backstop indefinitely. There are a number of ways that I've identified on a number of occasions at this dispatch box to deal with that. I've referenced the work on alternative arrangements. There is also the options of an end date or a unilateral exit mechanism, legal work, What matters in all of this is legally binding changes that ensure that we address the concern that has been raised by this House. That is what I will be discussing with the European Commission and will continue to discuss with them and European Union leaders.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Sounds like it might be quite confusing for the European Union to understand exactly what the Prime Minister is turning up with, actually. Mr. Speaker, she's had three groups of backbenchers working on three proposals. Firstly, to remove the backstop. Secondly, to make the backstop time-limited. And thirdly, to give the UK the right to exit unilaterally. So which of these proposals is the Prime Minister negotiating for today? 1, 2 or 3?
Prime Minister.
The right honourable gentleman points out that, as I have said, I've just said in my opening response to his question, he could have listened to that answer, but I'm happy to repeat it. There are a number of ways in which it is possible to address the issue that has been raised by this House of Commons, and work is being undertaken on those various issues. So on the alternative arrangements, for example, while the Commission has raised questions, particularly about the extent to which derogation from European Union law would be necessary in order to put those into place, and there's a concern about being able to achieve that if we're going to leave in time. Nevertheless, we have agreed that a work stream will go forward on those matters. We're also exploring the other issues, but the point is a very simple one. It isn't just a question of saying to the European Union, Actually, this is just the one thing. It's a question of sitting down with the European Union and finding a solution that is going to deliver for the people of Northern Ireland and Ireland, that is going to ensure that we deal with the concern that has been raised here in this House of Commons, and that is going to enable a deal to be brought back to this House of Commons, which this House of Commons can support, so we leave on the 29th of March with a deal.
Jeremy Corbyn.
This week, the Foreign Office Minister said categorically, we're not leaving without a deal. But sadly, he doesn't speak for the government. Her business minister says he's very conscious of the damage of not ruling out a hard Brexit is having on business and industry. People's jobs and livelihoods are in the Prime Minister's hands. Will she stop playing games with people's jobs and make it very clear that no deal is absolutely ruled out?
Prime Minister.
People's jobs and futures are in the hands of every member of this House. Once again, the Right Honourable Gentleman could have listened to the answer that I gave to his honourable friend in the first question that he asked. There are only two ways to take no deal off the table. One is to back a deal, the other is to revoke Article 50 and stay in the European Union. Now, he's refused to back a deal, so the obvious conclusion is that he must want to revoke Article 50. So he can stand up now and tell us what his policy is, to back the deal or stay in the European Union.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, I did write a very nice letter to the Prime Minister setting out what our views were. I'm sure she received it and read it, and I hope she's going to think on it. But it appears, Mr Speaker, that the Right Honourable Member for West Dorset is right when he said last week this government and my Prime Minister will actually prefer to head for the exit door without a deal in the event her deal does not succeed. And he went on to say it's a terrifying fact. Mr Speaker, thousands of car workers in Derby, Sunderland, Birmingham and Swindon are facing redundancy. Does that matter to the Prime Minister?
Prime Minister.
Say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, first of all, we have seen decisions taken by car manufacturers, and obviously the decision this week by Honda is one that is deeply disappointing. They have made absolutely clear that this is not a Brexit-related decision. This is a decision about the change that is taking place to the global car market. Jobs, of course, matter to this government. And while the Right Honourable Gentleman wants to talk about jobs, perhaps he would like to change the habit of a lifetime and stand up at that dispatch box and welcome the excellent job figures under this government that we've seen this week.
Well, the Prime Minister doesn't seem very interested in listening to those companies and industry bodies that say they need a customs union. And when she talks about jobs, will she also talk about those doing 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, those on 0-hours contracts, those are so low paid they have to access food banks just to survive, those suffering from in-work poverty under her watch, under her government? Last year, investment in the car industry halved. Brexit uncertainty is already costing investment. And where investment is cut today, jobs are cut tomorrow. Mr Speaker, that uncertainty wouldn't end even if the Prime Minister's rejected deal somehow or other got through, because it promises only the certainty of a spectrum of possible outcomes. So will the Prime Minister see sense and offer business and workers the certainty of a customs union that could protect jobs and industry in this country?
Prime Minister.
The Right Honourable Gentleman will also have heard from car manufacturers is their support for the deal that the government negotiated with the European Union. But if he wants to talk about jobs, I'm very happy to talk about jobs, because what have we seen in the latest figures? Employment at a record high, unemployment at its lowest since the 1970s. 96% of the increase in employment in the last year has come from full-time work. Youth unemployment has almost halved since 2010, and female employment is at a record high. But what did... Oh, it's all very well shouting from the front bench. Let's look at what record we saw under the Labour Party in government.
Order, Mr Lavery. Calm yourself. You have applied to be a statesman, but there is an apprenticeship, and you have to undergo it, and it is not assisted by that sort of sedentary ranting. Jeremy Corbyn. I beg your pardon, the Prime Minister is continuing her answer.
Mr. Speaker, so let's look at the record that the Labour Party had in government in terms of employment. Unemployment rose by nearly 500,000 under the Labour Party. Female employment rose by 26%. Female unemployment rose by 26%. Youth unemployment rose by 44%. And the number of households where no one had ever worked nearly doubled. That is a record of a Labour government where the working people pay the price of labour.
And, Mr. Speaker, child poverty halved under the Labour government. We invested in Sure Start in children's centres. We invested in a future for young people. She should get out a bit more and hear the anger of so many young people around this country of what they are suffering from now under her government, under her watch. The chair, Mr. Speaker, of the manufacturers' organisation Make UK said yesterday, "I'm saddened by the way that some of our politicians have put selfish political ideology ahead." You should hear the rest of it first. Ahead of the national interest and people's livelihoods, and left us facing the catastrophic prospect of leaving the EU next month with no deal. The Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, Food and Drink Federation, National Farmers Union and the CBI all want a disastrous no deal ruled out. Along with the TUC, many also support the UK being in a permanent customs union. A little over a month ago, and this government has failed to put the country first. The crisis of jobs going, industries under threat, and the Prime Minister indulges in what our own business minister calls fanciful nonsense. When is she going to put the interests of the people of this country before the interests of the Conservative Party?
Prime Minister.
To the right honourable gentleman, can I say to the right honourable gentleman, he has consistently put his party political interest ahead of the national interest. He has. We can take no deal off the table by agreeing a deal. Yet at every stage he has acted to frustrate a deal. He has acted to make no deal more likely. But that's not surprising from this Labour Party, because what do we see from his Labour Party? Hamas and Hezbollah friends, Israel and the United States enemies, Hatton a hero, Churchill a villain. Attlee and Bevan will be spinning in their grave. That's what the right honourable gentleman has done to a once proud Labour Party. We will never let him do it to our country.